Good evening, everybody. I was asked by the superintendent to look at the practice that I have heard much about here this evening and you're all now familiar with. And I was asked by the superintendent if I would review that practice and determine whether it violated any of the district's policies, whether the practice could continue, and if the practice continued, whether or not there were any potential legal consequences for continuing the practice. And so I looked at the practice, which is speech. I did not look at the practice in the context of whether it represented speech of the LGBTQ plus community. I looked at the speech itself and determined that it did not violate any of the board's policies. I then looked at whether or not the practice could continue. And I indicated that the practice could continue provided that we also permitted the same practice with regard to any opposing viewpoints, with regard to any opposing speech, that we could not pick and choose which speech and which viewpoints we would allow to be presented in our schools. If someone wanted to present a flag that was representative of their point of view, if someone wanted to display placards that was representative of their point of view, provided it was not profane or that it did not incite violence, we would have to permit it. We are a limited public forum. And so while this practice would not violate any of our policies, we look to whether or not there are any constitutional implications of allowing it to continue. The number of Supreme Court decisions, United States Supreme Court decisions, and state Supreme Court decisions are legion with regard to what our obligation is if we are going to allow speech to be displayed in our public schools. And so, as I said, if we were going to allow this practice to continue, we would have to be prepared to allow others who might have an opposing viewpoint or may have a viewpoint that is not necessarily opposing, but a viewpoint that might otherwise be seen by some of us as controversial. And we would have to permit that viewpoint to be displayed in our schools to the same extent that these placards are being displayed and the flag is being displayed to represent this club and this community. And so I indicated to the superintendent that if that were to occur, that what we also needed to be prepared for is the possibility that the presentation of those other placards, those other flags, that they might very well be seen as controversial. And if they were seen as controversial, they could have an impact on the educational program that we deliver to all students in this school district. And based on that, it was my advice that we discontinue the private display in classrooms, in conference rooms, of any speech that was not part of our curriculum.
And so in closing, in going forward, I want to make a very firm commitment to our community that the safety of our LGBTQ students, our community, will remain utmost priority. And there has been some misconstrued statements around the portrait of a panther, mostly due because the project is still getting underground. It's not about a panther, it's not about a mascot. It's about defining core values. There was a speaker this evening, forgive me, I don't remember who specifically, but spoke about E and spoke about empathy and what the high school is doing. This project is putting us on that path to define our core values so that we have a common vocabulary for talking about how we treat each other. And when we treat each other in a way that breaks trust or violates policy or our discipline code, we have a common vocabulary for fixing that. So that's the ultimate goal of the Portrait of a Panther project. That will also be a student-led initiative, which I've heard a lot of value in this evening as well. But to do it well and to do it authentically, it will take several months. It has started, and it will not complete until likely towards the end of this school year. And with that, I conclude my responses to the public comment.
Thank you. Moving on to district distinctions.